Hello and welcome to the World Wanders podcast, your source for travel stories, travel destinations, and travel philosophy.
I'm Amanda.
I'm Ryan.
And we're your hosts. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by AutoSlash. AutoSlash is the #1 site for getting a great deal on a car rental. They figure out the best coupons and discount codes to get you the lowest rate possible, and then track prices on your rental right until the day you pick it up. If they find a lower rate, they email you so you can lock in the savings. It's like price perfection on your rental. They can even track the price of rentals made on other websites. AutoSlash has saved customers millions of dollars on car rentals, and that's why we're so excited to have them sponsoring the podcast. Renters on average save 30% or more using AutoSlash. And the best part is that it's free to use. So you can head on over to autoslash.com and you can get started today without having to pay anything up front. So if you're not sure exactly how it works, you can just go give it a try and see for yourself. And you may be wondering how AutoSlash gets you the best rates. They do it in 2 ways. They search hundreds of coupons and discount codes for all the major rental companies to get you the lowest rate. AutoSlash also tracks your rental once you've booked it. If the rate drops, AutoSlash alerts you so that you can rebook and save. AutoSlash can also track an existing reservation that you already have. This works for car rentals because there's no credit card required to book and there are no change fees. Many customers rebook multiple times as rates dropped, and AutoSlash finds better deals. So if you're looking for a car rental for your next trip or your next vacation, head on over to autoslash.com and give it a try for free. Hello and welcome to another episode of the World Wanders podcast. We are very excited for today's episode of the podcast because we're talking about Iceland. And for those of you who have listened to our podcast for a while, you may have gone back way deep into our episodes and listened to our very first official episode, which was on Iceland. Well, a lot has changed about Iceland, and we actually didn't get to see that much. So we are very excited to be joined on the podcast today by Yvette and James, who are friends of ours who have recently traveled Iceland. So welcome to the show today, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And also, for those of you who have listened for a while, you might remember Yvette from our West Coast Trail episode. She was one of my hiking buddies who braved 7 days, 6 nights of backcountry hiking with me.
Brave is a good word to use, yeah.
So we were thinking that a good place to start would be to back up a little bit and just talk about, what has kind of inspired you guys to start traveling. So if you guys can just tell us a little bit about your travel story.
Well, I guess I could start by saying really what's inspired me is Yvette, and as silly and cliche as that sounds, I was kind of stuck in a rut, in a job kind of mentality where I just didn't do anything. My main focus was work. But she and I had met online, and I just followed her as she was traveling, all over the States. And I was just inspired by her and her pictures and her whole attitude, I guess, and her just carefree sense, and it really kind of drew me in. So when she and I finally did meet in person, we met in Vancouver and then did a trip to Alaska, a cruise, and ever since then I've just really been travel whenever I can, and now I would just want to see as many places as possible and do as many things as I possibly can. So for me, the answer to that question is pretty easy.
I love it.
I wasn't expecting that answer from him. You've given me butterflies. For me, my more in-depth traveling, I guess, started 2 years ago when I quit my professional job and got a 2-year visa to go work and live in Canada. Leading up to that, I traveled through the US and then made my way to Canada. And from there, I did more travels to Hawaii and Alaska, but mostly centered around North America. And I've just been back and forth between Australia, the US and Canada, and I guess now Iceland since then.
Yeah, that's amazing. And, before we dive into Iceland, I'm curious, what made you decide to leave your full-time job and go to the U.S.?
I get asked this question a lot, and my answer is quite simple in that I just felt like something was missing. I just felt like there was more to life than just working a professional job, albeit like I loved my job. I work as a physiotherapist at home and I get to help people every single day and change their lives. But I felt like there was a part of my life that I hadn't explored. I didn't know what the answer was as to what was missing. I just knew that I needed to get out of my hometown of Melbourne, Australia, and just really see what the world has to offer. And to be honest, I went in blind and I haven't looked back since. It kind of just works itself out. When you start traveling, you just kind of find the answers as you go.
Yeah, we can really relate to that as well with the trip we took to South America, where we kind of quit our jobs. We didn't have a plan. But then over time, we kind of figured out what the next step was going to be, but we definitely didn't have a vision for it in the future. And then we ended up going to Banff, which is where we met. So how did Iceland catch your guys' eye?
For me personally, honestly, I mean, I'm pretty big on Instagram. I just like looking at all the pictures on there, and Iceland just kept on coming up time and time again, and I just couldn't look past the photographs and not make it next on my list. People talk about a bucket list. My bucket list is kind of like ever changing and evolving, and things will skip the line all the time, and Iceland just went right up to number one. Just, I guess, the mystery that it had to offer, and I just had to see it for myself.
Yeah, to me there was a certain charm about it, just being that high up near the Arctic. To me, it was just kind of a mysterious, kind of neat little place that I've just always wanted to check out. So, yeah, I really enjoyed that one for sure.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting for us because we went to Iceland back in 2011. Like, I think before Iceland was kind of cool. Like, I think that
yeah, it's gotten huge now.
Yeah. Like, it was just, I remember people being like, "So where are you starting your Europe trip?" And we're like, "Iceland," and they were like, "Oh, cool."
Yeah, it seems like unusual place. Not many people think to go there. Of course, over the years it's gotten really popular, but I could definitely see how it'd be shocking for people to hear that.
I mean, we still get that reaction. We got that reaction more so when we said we're going to Iceland in the middle of winter. Like, people just, honestly, particularly James's family, looked at us like we were crazy.
Yeah, I just couldn't believe it.
I mean, Arizona boy, Australian girl.
Yeah, exactly.
They're like, "You're going where? For a holiday? Like, that's going to be fun?" Well, yeah.
Yeah, and so I actually want to dive into that. I think that one of the things that you have to choose when you go to a place is what season you're going to go in. And I think for a lot of places, there's kind of an obvious, choice. But with Iceland, it offers very different things in the winter and the summer. Like, the winter is short days, but a lot of really cool ice and winter activities. Whereas the summer, which is when we went, is, daylight the entire time. I'm curious how you guys decided on winter.
It was actually funny. I was originally meant to go to Iceland in summer. I was meant to go in July of last year, but James wasn't able to go at that time, and I was at the time really disappointed. But so we decided to go in December instead. So we figured if we're going to go in winter, we're going to go over New Year's Eve just so we can experience.
Yeah, I wanted to do New Year's there for sure. I just saw a lot about Reykjavik and the fires they do, the big giant bonfires, the fireworks shows, everything. It just seemed like a really cool place to be during that time.
Yeah, and I guess once I kind of was down with the idea of going in winter, I kind of started looking at things that we could only do in the winter, and things like the Northern Lights. You're going to have a much higher chance of seeing them in the wintertime. You won't see them in the summer, obviously. It's daylight all the time. And then ice caves. So ice caves for both of us was huge. And when we found out that we could only do them, I think the season runs from November through till March. And when we found that out, it was like a blessing in disguise that we couldn't go in July, because that was definitely one of the things that we both wanted to do. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you explain what ice caves are?
Okay, yeah, so a non-professional description. I believe so. Basically, they're like tunnels that form within a glacier.
It's the melt water in the warmer months when they melt. basically the liquid water goes down and then flows out, downhill towards the lake or the ocean, wherever. But basically it creates big veins through the glacier. So then in the wintertime, again, when everything freezes over, there's no more liquid water. What you're left with is just a big open tunnel through the belly of the glacier.
Wow, that sounds unreal.
So to access it, you will trek on a glacier for a while, and then I'm almost certain you can only do this with a guide in Iceland. We certainly did. It's just way too dangerous without one. So you trek on a glacier, which in itself is a tour for most people.
Yeah, that's great.
Which we had done previously, and so to then add an ice cave exploration to it was just cherry on top for us.
Yeah, that's really cool. And so I want to dive into, at some point, talk about, your highlights and lowlights and all that sort of thing. But before we kind of get into everything that you guys did on this trip, once you'd set on a time frame that you were going to go, like, okay, we're going in December, how did you start the planning process?
Okay, so I'll have to take over
this one
because James did zero planning.
Yeah,
that sounds familiar.
I like to plan, but also because he doesn't.
Tell me where to sign and who to make the check out to, and you do the rest.
Okay, this is a very good question because Iceland, for me, particularly Iceland in winter, was different to like other places I had been to. I found there wasn't as much information out there as there was for other destinations, particularly on TripAdvisor, for example, if you were to talk about renting a car and driving in Iceland in winter, the locals are very much, I guess they're against it just because there are a lot of hazards that come with it. And if you're not experienced in driving in Iceland in winter, it can be quite disastrous. So for me, I couldn't rely on TripAdvisor as much just because I was planning a self-drive trip. So I really needed the advice from that aspect, which I couldn't get from there, but I got a lot of it from just personal travel blogs online. I did a lot of Googling to find the answers that I needed. And then once I started getting a rough plan of where we wanted to go and what we wanted to see, I went as far as just emailing, like with Airbnbs that we stayed at, I would email the host and say to them, look, do I need a 4-wheel drive? What's the conditions like in your area? Can you give me some advice? And I think for me that was really critical because they know better than anybody what it's going to be like, and people are a bit more forthcoming when you're going to stay with them and giving you information and helping you out a little bit more than just the generic TripAdvisor post. I'm just trying to think. I think so mostly personal travel blogs, and then also friends. I'd had a handful of friends that had been there, and I just asked them for information as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. I feel like when we went to Iceland, I just remember being like, there's no resources for any of this. And we probably could have picked up a Lonely Planet or something, but we definitely didn't do that. So we kind of just did the very touristy things, which included, in Reykjavik, the Blue Lagoon and the Golden Circle. Were those two of the things that you guys did?
Yes, we did.
Yes.
So we did the Blue Lagoon. We'd booked it a few months in advance just because it's advised to do so you don't miss out. And then we did a self-drive of the Golden Circle. Do you have anything?
Yeah, the Blue Lagoon we did actually the first day. We literally landed in Reykjavik, waited in line to get our rental car, jumped in, and then took off straight to the lagoon. And I actually liked it that way. It was kind of getting right into it. We got there, of course, way before sunrise, so it was kind of nice to see the sunrise and kind of wake up in a sense to our surroundings. It was just pitch black, and then all of a sudden, we're seeing little by little the light come, and then all of a sudden it's wow, look where we are, So that was really cool. The Golden Circle was really, really crowded. I actually was kind of bummed, to be honest, when we were on that, on the southern part of the island. I really enjoyed being up in the Snaefellsnes Peninsula. It just seemed like there was a lot less people up there. Most of the tourists go down to the south coast there where the Golden Circle is. Yeah. But it was still, there's a lot to see there. It was spectacular. It's just you got to be prepared to, dodge crowds.
Yeah. So, that sounds like a really great way to like show up and be able to go to the Blue Lagoon and spend time there, kind of decompress after your flight. What time was the sun rising and setting while you guys were there?
It would start usually about 10:30 is when like you would get the first kind of twinge of light, but then about 11 o'clock is when you kind of got the
like the actual sunrise.
Actual
like
sunrise,
11, yeah.
about 11 to 11:30. But then the sun would just stay just over the horizon, all day, which really was only about 4.5 hours. But it would just kind of create this pink kind of haze in the sky, and it's just, unexplainable. It was just magic, really. That the way it would light things up, it was just spectacular.
Yeah, that's really cool to hear. And already it's interesting to hear how different your experience was from ours, because we went to the Blue Lagoon just like out of a whim, like it wasn't planned or anything, because it was not, that busy. Like you would not have missed out at the point that we were there. And we also went at I think it was 10:30 p.m. at night because the sun didn't set at all. So I remember it was kind of almost like your average 4 p.m. sun, and it was 10:30 p.m. and we were jet lagged.
Wow.
And we were like, this is just so weird. So we were there kind of at dusk time, but it was nighttime. So definitely an interesting experience.
Yeah, I'd say. Yeah, it's cool though. The waters just look so neat. I mean, it's just a neat area there. It's something that you really can't miss, in my opinion.
Yeah, and so, so that's, a must-see, and that's something that I think we would agree with as well. With regards to the Golden Circle, you said it's busy and it's crowded. Is that something that if you guys were to go back, would you just kind of skip, or would you recommend for people to go other places instead?
I think given its popularity, we spent 10 days in Iceland and we almost skipped it we had one day left and we thought we can't not see it. I guess for listeners that don't know, it's called the Golden Circle because it's just like a set of I guess different places that you can go and see. Like there's a waterfall, there's a geyser, and I think it's the Pengvalir National Park. I have no idea how to say that. And so it kind of makes a circle, and then it's crowned the Golden Circle. But it was definitely more crowded than the other places that we went to. But I think we're definitely glad that we saw it.
Yeah, I can't say I would skip it. For people who are traveling there for the first time, I wouldn't recommend skipping it per se. But I could say in all honesty that when I go back, I would probably avoid it. But it needs to be seen. The national park there, the geysers, waterfalls there you can't miss. So it's definitely something that needs to be seen.
And I guess also, I think the national park there itself is a World Historic Site. So that's pretty cool to go and see that.
Like a UNESCO World Historic Site?
I'm not sure. I think it might be just because of what happened there with the Vikings. I honestly don't know the background story too well, but it's a World Heritage Site of some sort. So that's something I'd have to look into though.
Okay. Yeah, cool. And so you guys rented a car. Is that definitely something you would recommend in terms of getting around Iceland?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're of course, if you go in the winter, you just kind of have to be not afraid to drive in snow or icy conditions. We actually had a blizzard that we went through where the visibility was literally, I couldn't see past the hood of the car. We had to actually stop and wait till it kind of calmed down, and then we were able to move up, a half a mile, and then we'd have to stop again. And it was pretty scary. I mean, the wind speed was up to 90 miles an hour. There was buses and stuff blown off the road. So it was a little intimidating. But, if you have any confidence whatsoever in driving in not so great conditions, I think it's definitely the way to go. I always recommend that over a tour bus situation, just because you have so much more freedom to stop and go and just do whatever you want.
I think, though, to add to that, I think it's important for people to do their research. It's funny because James and I, we went back and forth about 100 times about whether we should get a car or not. James was all for it because he's got winter driving experience on ice and in snowy conditions. Me, coming from Australia, did not have that experience. So personally, I wouldn't have driven alone without James there, because having that experience. And also, there's other drivers on the road, that other tourists that also don't have that experience and make it dangerous for others. I think it's something to really be cautious with and to really do your research. So with stuff like that, the car rental companies will give you give you like ideas as to what you should do and not do, and researching the road rules was also really
road
important.
Signs also. There's some bridges that are only one lane where you have to be aware of oncoming traffic. So it's a little different, but it's certainly, like, again, I would just recommend it definitely over any other.
The other big thing with driving that even the locals do is they have a website called road.is, and basically I think it has like 15-minute interval updates of the road conditions, because the weather can change very quickly. So the blizzard that we went through, there was no blizzard, and then all of a sudden the high winds started coming in because the glacier that we were driving next to had created its own kind of like weather system, and so that wind was coming after the glacier, and it made the roads literally impassable.
They actually shut them down.
They shut down roads from Vik, which is at the south, back to Reykjavik. So we had friends that were stranded there, and so basically checking the road conditions frequently is a must. So if you're not driving, your role is just as important, checking road.is at like 15 to 30 minute intervals. It'll tell you like what the weather is like, whether the roads is icy, if it's snowing, and if the roads are closed. So that was an integral part of our trip to be checking that website frequently.
Yeah, that's a great resource to know about, and it's super interesting to hear about that as well. I mean, that must be like so scary to be like, okay, we're in the clear, and like refresh, and it's like, oh shit, there's a blizzard coming. Like, we need to drive.
Refresh, and the winds were like increasing by like 5 miles per hour. I was like, okay, and then they kept on increasing. I'm like, okay, James, I don't think we can keep driving anymore. Like, we're gonna be blown off the road.
Yeah, it was scary, but. Yeah,
but that was 10 minutes of a 10-day trip. It wasn't always bad. And when we knew the conditions were bad, we didn't drive. And I think you asked me a question about planning and stuff. That was the most important thing I found. I had scheduled days where I had, in my little itinerary, I was like, on this day, we'll do the things that we missed the last 2 days, because you just don't know. And it actually happened to us. I'd had planned something, we had to cancel it due to the blizzard, and we just did it the next day. And I think from what I had researched is a lot of people will attempt to drive through these really bad weather conditions because they're on a schedule or they've done it, and they will risk it, which we were just never going to do. And I think that just comes down to common sense. It's like you won't risk your life basically just to make it to your next destination. You would stay put and wait for the storm to pass.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. So it's basically like when you're planning, you should plan, like give yourself some time for bad weather.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You never know what it's going to do.
Particularly in the wintertime when you have about 5 hours of daylight. If you're driving long stretches, if you're driving for 2 hours a day, you're not left with very much time to explore. So, and being a new place that you haven't been to, sometimes you don't know how long it's going to take you, or if you're going to go on a short hike, it might take you longer than you anticipated because of the weather. So better to have spare days than to try and jam pack everything and be disappointed, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And so were you guys doing mostly day trips out of Reykjavik, or did you go and stay in smaller towns as well?
Yeah, we stayed in smaller towns. We what was it? The first night we stayed in Reykjavik.
We stayed in Reykjavik because we obviously just come off 2 long flights, so we rested and didn't drive while tired.
And then moved up to the Snæfellsnes Peninsula, and
which is on the west.
Yeah, on the west coast, and that accommodation we had there was just spectacular.
Yeah, that was an Airbnb.
Yeah, an Airbnb, a little small cabin on a lake I mean, it was just spectacular. But yeah, definitely we were definitely mobile. We never stayed in one place for too long, which is nice because from Reykjavik to get to the different destinations, like Yvette mentioned, you would have to spend too much time driving, burning up your precious daylight.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. So I just pulled up a map of Iceland so that I can follow along with this itinerary. So can you walk us through like what you guys did on your trip?
Yeah, absolutely. So day one, we just drove from the airport via the Blue Lagoon and then went to Reykjavik and stayed there. The next day, we drove up to the Snæfellsnes Peninsula. God knows how to say that. It's like up to the west. We spent 2 nights there.
On the northern end of it, was it?
Yeah, we were up a little bit higher, but and then we made our way back down to Reykjavik for New Year's Eve for that night. And then from there, we went down south and stayed in Vik. And then we went a little bit further east and stayed in Hoffen. And then we went back and stayed in Vik another couple of nights and then back to Reykjavik again.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's helpful to have the map. So for anyone listening, if you have no idea what she's talking about, pull up a map and it's very clear. I'm curious if you can tell us a bit about, this New Year's Eve thing that they do in Iceland. You said it was something you guys were looking forward to. What was it like?
Yeah, I mean, they have, I think, about a dozen bonfires.
I think it was, 8 all over the city.
All over the city. So you pick whichever one you're closest to. And by bonfire, it's just, I can't even describe it. I mean,
huge.
The fire must have been 100 foot at least around in diameter. And I mean, it was the biggest fire I've ever seen. Yeah, it was unbelievable. And just tall. I mean, we were standing 200 feet away and you could feel the heat like you were standing right next to it. But then just picture just thousands of people surrounding it. Everyone's shooting fireworks off. People are just mingling around. That was just amazing. And then everyone goes inside. What about 10:30? All the locals go in to watch some program, some television show, which we still never found out what it is. But then everyone comes back out again, and then it's kind of barrages towards the church. What was the name of that church? I can't remember.
Hengmalir? I don't know.
Hengmalir or something. Yeah, and then just the most spectacular fireworks show we've ever seen. It went on for probably 20 minutes straight, just like a grand finale fireworks show, while there was just shoulder to shoulder people, standing in the streets downtown. It was pretty amazing. Just every bar, every place just cleared out, and everyone just hit the streets. So it was amazing. It was a cool place to be, that's for sure.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I feel like we haven't done too many like cool traveling New Year's, so that's an interesting one to hear about.
Yeah, that one was definitely a first for me, and most New Year's seem to just be kind of a big build up, and then nothing ends up happening. But yeah, that was definitely amazing. If anyone can make it out there for New Year's, I would just highly recommend it.
And then was that the end of your trip there, or did you go somewhere else after?
No, we just did Iceland.
That was basically just the beginning. Oh wait, are you talking about Reykjavik there or Iceland?
Yeah, after New Year's.
Yeah, that was day 4, I think.
Yeah, we still had the whole.
We still had another week.
Vik and Hof was afterwards.
Yes, correct.
Right. Sorry, I missed that.
Yeah, because we were we ended up in Reykjavik 3 times, at the start for New Year's and then again at the end.
Yeah, and I'm curious, of all the things that you guys did, can you share some of like the highlights and maybe some of the lowlights as well, like things that you would definitely recommend for people to do and see?
Yeah, so that national park that we were in, part of the Golden Circle, I don't know if it's the only place in the world, but one of the only places in the world where you can snorkel or dive in between the North American tectonic plate and the Eurasian plate. So like you're basically between 2 continents snorkeling or diving, and it's meant to be like a world-class diving site because the water is so clear and blue. That was just spectacular. I mean, people thought we were crazy to be snorkeling it was like 2 degrees Celsius, which is like 35 Fahrenheit or something, in just a wet
good Fahrenheit there.
Dry suit. Yeah. I know, I've been in America for too long. But that was pretty sensational, I think, because it's like, where else in the world can you do that?
Yeah, that was amazing. Also, the ice cave tour that we did, that one is, again, spectacular. And I forgive me, I can't tell you the name of the glacier. It's just way too big of a name to even begin to try to pronounce. But yeah, like Yvette had touched on, just the trek wearing the full, crampons, trekking across the glacier. It was quite a trek. I mean, a couple miles, I'd say, at least on this ice before we ended up in the glacier, into the opening of the cave. And then we went back in quite a ways. I'd say probably at least 200 yards or so. And that was just amazing. I mean, the scenery in there, just being surrounded by, ice. I mean, it's, again, I felt like I was on a different planet. So that would be something I would just highly recommend. But I keep bringing up the Snafflesness Peninsula. To me, one of my favorite days was just driving all the sites around the peninsula. And there's a lot to see. There was, tons of waterfalls. The mountain. How come I can't think of it?
I know. They basically call it like Little Iceland or like Mini Iceland. You basically get all of Iceland in this one peninsula. So
and you could do it in a day. You could drive the whole and see all the sites in a day. And there was just, not nearly as many crowds. It was a lot more quiet. The scenery, the sights, to me, again, that was for sure one of the highlights.
The other fun thing, highlight for me, James was a bit chicken to do it with me half the time, but was to go searching for like the secluded geothermal hot springs that you see all the time. And it's on Instagram. They don't like to post where they are, so you really have to look for them.
That always really frustrates me. I'm like, yes, put a location. Where are you? I want to be here too.
Yeah, because they don't want people to find it. And I managed to find one after lots of Googling, and I went there, and I was the only one, and it must have been the coldest day. It was below freezing, I don't know how much, and it was windy, and I said, I'm getting in this water. Nothing's going to stop me. And it was just absolutely spectacular. If you can imagine, just like this pool of hot geothermal water surrounded by mountains and snow, and it was just like any Instagram picture I'd ever seen. I was really, really happy with that.
And so can you share where that was?
Oh, yeah. I think
You're not keeping a secret from us, are you? You're like, no, sorry, I'm not telling you.
No, I mean, I'd tell you what it is, but I can't even pronounce it. It starts with an L. Landra something. It's like on the way to the to that peninsula that we were talking about on the west coast there. But yeah, it's I've tagged it on Instagram, and I'll definitely do a write-up about it.
Yeah, that sounds good. Then maybe we can add it to the show notes as well, so people aren't like, how am I supposed to find these places when I don't know what they are?
Yeah, and it's funny though, this particular one, you could only fit like 3 people in it at most, and I think I was lucky that there was another couple there when I got there, and I kind of just crashed their party, but that was okay.
I'm sure you guys were quick friends.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And I know we kind of talked about the Golden Circle a little bit, maybe not being like, being something, to do, but maybe not like something you would necessarily do again. Were there any kind of like low points or things you guys didn't love or things you were like, this is kind of just meh, I might not do this again? I
don't know if there's, to be quite honest, I don't know if it was so much low points as it was just we weren't expecting there to be so many crowds. So that for us, it really did take away a little bit from the experience. But I guess that also drove us to try and find places that people may not have been. So I'll give you an example. We were on the south coast visiting like these waterfalls. You can't miss them. You literally see them from the road. You don't even need to do any planning. You drive on the main road, which is road 1 or something, and you'll see them and you'll stop and you'll go in. And one particular waterfall we went, very busy, very crowded. And then I had read about another one that was hidden about 500 meters to the left of it. And we set out to find it. We were prepared. We came with crampons, which as a side note, is a must do. And then we were able to get into this waterfall behind a cliff, and there was nobody else in there, merely because it was almost impossible to access without waterproof shoes and crampons. And it was just spectacular. Other lowlights. Yeah,
just to me, it was mainly just the crowds, just trying to avoid, the most popular spots where there's just tons and tons of people. And then, of course, the expense. I mean, it was definitely probably the most expensive place I've ever been there. So that's definitely something to think about and be prepared for. Yep. But there's really nothing negative I can say, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Particularly food. It's really difficult, even when you stop at a shop. And some places, if you're not prepared with snacks and things, there's not many places you can get food except like a restaurant in a hotel. And to be honest, we didn't walk away without spending at least $100 on a meal, and that was us going easy because it was just really quite pricey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's kind of what we remember as well. I think we ate a lot of Doritos and hot dogs while we were there.
Yeah, that's the way to go.
What did you think of Icelandic food?
I myself really enjoyed it. They just can't make a burger to save their life. I don't think really anyone in Europe can, But, as far as the traditional stuff goes, the lamb dishes, I actually had the Hakarl, the shark, the rotten shark. And I am a lot more adventurous with eating, so I was okay with it. Yvette she almost passed out when she tried it.
No, because it's so basically, is it like ammonia? What is it?
Yeah, it's ammonia.
Like the smell, literally, and then the taste, like it had this funny sensation on me. It made me dizzy. It was because it's like so acidic, I guess. I don't know.
But yeah, a lot of fish there. They eat a lot of fish, a lot of lamb. And I really enjoyed it. I didn't have any issue with the food at all.
Would you second that, Yvette?
Yeah, definitely. I think we were spoiled. We did eat at nice places. And the places we ate at, we really weren't disappointed with. Although we did notice a pattern where the main three things were lamb, salmon, and I think Arctic char. Like, that were your options all the time. And I like salmon and Arctic char, so we were pretty good.
Yeah, and I want to touch on that rotten shark thing that you were talking about. Is this like a delicacy there, like a traditional dish? Like, what is it for them?
Yeah, they basically, if you want, I can kind of get into it. It's the Greenland shark, which is popular up. It's there's a lot of them up in the Arctic area there. And these are deep water sharks. So apparently the sharks they don't urinate. And so
that's so weird.
Yeah, the urea and the ammonia and stuff just kind of absorbs into their meat. So the meat is actually poisonous. If you try to eat it, you can get really sick if you try to eat it fresh. So I guess however many hundreds of years ago they discovered that if you let the meat kind of rot a little bit, that it then becomes edible. Not so much palatable, but edible. And the process is they cut it up into chunks, then they throw them into a crate. They let them sit outside in the crate for, I believe, about 3 or 4 months before they then hang them in a hang room or a kind of like looks like a smokehouse. And they let them hang there for another 3 or 4 months. And then the meat kind of develops like a brown crust, and then they cut into it, and it's white meat on the inside, and they just eat it just as is. So it's literally rotten shark meat. Wow.
Do you eat the brown crust?
No, I don't think you can. I mean, maybe you can, but we didn't. They just cut it into little chunks, and you can either eat it as is, or they recommend putting it on a piece of bread just to kind of help with the shocking flavor of it.
Man.
And there's actually like a shark museum on that Snaefellsnes Peninsula that we went to, where they will take you into the museum and show you how they do it, and they'll show you a video of the process of it. And then you can go out into their, I don't know, is it a shed? It's kind of like an outdoor shed. It's all open, and you can see the big chunks of shark hanging out there.
Boy, does it stink.
Yeah, it really smells. James bought a T-shirt from there, and I brought it home, and I'm like, it still smells of shark. Because they sell the T-shirts in the museum where they serve the shark, and
the smell just won't go away.
Yeah. It always really, interest is the right word, but it's just like so curious how someone figured out that you could eat that. You know, it must have been like a shark that was just like left to rot, and then someone just really wanted to eat it. Like, who's that person who's like tried it for the first time? Like, I'll give this a shot.
Desperate to eat that thing. I mean, if you get sick by eating the meat, then just leave it alone. You know, don't eat it. But no, they have to figure out a way to at least somehow be able to get it down the hatch. So it's quite interesting to say the least.
Yeah. So does it taste good?
I don't know if I would say good. I mean, it's like a serious food. It's definitely not for the faint of heart. But I would compare it to like a really strong cheese. It's also got a heavy fishy taste, as well as like an ammonia taste. So it's very difficult to explain, but it's definitely not for the faint of heart.
My answer is no. It does not taste good.
Yeah, that's the short answer.
Yeah, I like, James, how your answer was.
Beating around the bush.
Trying to like clarify. Yeah, it's not bad. It tastes like ammonia and like dead body.
Yeah. It's
he
not
went
bad,
back for
not
seconds,
good.
and I was like, I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah, one in Rome type of thing. I just had to really experience it.
If you want to talk about Icelandic food, skyr is like a traditional Icelandic dessert, and everybody should have
yogurt,
skyr. It's basically like whipped yogurt, if that makes any sense.
And it's just delicious.
I think they whip like cream and yogurt together, and it like makes this delicious Icelandic dessert. It's great. That's what we tried it from the store, and then we also tried it at the restaurants, and we loved it. It's a good dessert to try. If you don't want to try shark, but you want to say you tried Icelandic food.
Yeah, that sounds more up my alley, personally. Yeah. You didn't get to see Ryan and I's faces while you were describing that, but we were looking at each other cringing.
Yeah.
You said brown crust. I was like, oh.
Oh, yeah, it literally is that bad. It's as bad as it sounds. But again, one in Rome, it's something that you kind of have to experience.
Okay. Yeah, when in Iceland. All right.
Exactly.
Yeah, we'll leave that up for the listeners to decide. I'm going to probably pass on that one, but that's just me. So you guys
You're not missing out.
Yeah, I feel like you've done a good enough job explaining it that I know exactly what the experience is like. But you guys have done a really good job at, kind of touching on a couple of the things that you said you should have when you're kind of packing, like crampons was one of them. What else did you feel like was really like great that you brought that you think people should pack with them for this type of trip versus, what did you not have that you would definitely bring next time?
So I think along with the crampons, I think they're a necessity. A lot of people didn't bring them.
Reiterate
and
that.
And they're really expensive in Iceland. It's like $70 to buy a pair, and we got a pair for $20 on Amazon.
Amazon, yeah.
So that obviously, but along with that, waterproof boots are a must, and also then winter grade boots as well. So I just headed over to the Columbia outlet here and got some really, really good boots for that, because your toes will otherwise you'll get really cold and you won't be able to stay outdoors for long periods without them. A really good winter jacket is an absolute must when there.
Pants too. Your legs can get cold if you wear thermal long johns on, and then a good pair of kind of snow tight pants. Of course, if you're going to be there that time of the year.
Yeah, and then also things like neck warmers, because it can get windy.
Face.
Yeah, for me personally, I didn't realize how cold my hands would be, and I had a pair of good gloves, but I would go as far as saying, next time I go, I will spend the money on a really good pair of gloves. It just is a game changer. If you're out there and your hands are freezing, you can't use your phone to take photos, and it takes away from the experience. I think that's
we were pretty good with equipment and stuff, we did pretty good. There was nothing that I felt that we really missed out on. Although, like Yvette had said, though, I want to reiterate, if you're going in the winter time, a $20 pair of, rubber crampons that you throw over your boots are just an absolute game changer.
And because we saw people in like tennis shoes and particular waterfalls that we'd hike to, I personally couldn't have done it without crampons. We tried at one point. I fell twice before I said, we need to go back to the car because I can't risk falling a third time. And yeah, absolutely vital, we think. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense for sure.
And if you guys were going back in the summer, is there anything or any areas, obviously the experience is really different, but what would be kind of on the top of your list for stuff to do in the summer?
Waterfalls.
No, yeah. So for me, it's to go into the highlands. So we didn't do that on our trip just because
it's all closed up. In the winter.
The roads are closed up, and you really need like a specialized vehicle to go into the highlands. They have like specialized 4x4 cars that can do that. And I think there's like a multi-day hike that you can do in Iceland up in the highlands, and that's something I came across in my research, and I was like, oh, can I do that in winter? And it was a hard no.
Yeah, and then the waterfalls, they were all awesome to see in the winter.
But they're frozen
but they're
over
all
in the winter.
Frozen,
Not all of them, but some of them.
Yeah, a good majority are froze. At least there's some water obviously still running through. You can hear it, but you can't see it. But that would definitely be awesome to see in the summertime, because there really are some spectacular waterfalls there all over the whole island, it seems.
And I think the other thing was I chose strategically to only go to the west a little bit and then the south features, just because of the unpredictable weather and the road conditions, just because the northeast tends to get the worst weather, and I just didn't want to chance it on us being our first time in Iceland. I thought we'd just focus on those areas. But if I'd go back in the summer, I'd definitely explore the north and the east a lot more.
Definitely.
Can you drive around the entire country?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be cool then.
Right time of year, of course. You can't in the winter time.
I think you might be able to, but it's just something that we didn't want to try. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just hearing about your experience with the blizzard and like it happening so fast, and buses being like blown over and stuff, it sounds like it's really not the type of thing that you want to mess with. And I think Yvette and I, we've talked a lot like off the podcast about how sometimes people don't realize when they don't have these types of like weather conditions or maybe animals or that type of thing in their country, that it's like, this is not an amusement park, it's not a zoo, it's like this stuff is like actually dangerous, and you really do need to be careful.
Yeah, and Iceland, I think, as you guys touched on when you were there, it wasn't as busy. I think it's really boomed in tourism of late, particularly in the last couple of years since the Game of Thrones had come out. I think that's a big draw card for Iceland. But their roads aren't equipped for it. So basically you'll see something beautiful, which is all the time while you're driving, and you can't pull over. There's no shoulder. So it's basically just two lanes, and there's nowhere to pull over. And we actually quite frequently saw people stopped in the middle of the road to take a photograph, and it was just not the thing. We wanted to so many times just stop and take a photo, but it was just too dangerous. To do that, and the person behind us may not notice we have stopped. So hopefully in the coming years maybe they'll make it a little bit more tourist friendly, but who knows.
Yeah, definitely. That's really interesting to hear. And so do you guys have anything else that you want to talk about or share with listeners about Iceland in general?
I feel like we've pretty much touched it. Definitely go to the beaches for sure. Every beach. Where were the columns there? I'm trying to look at my notes here.
Oh, so I was referring to like
basalt.
the basalt columns in Vik down at like Black Sand Beach. It's just quite unique.
Yeah, that's
Iceland.
Definitely neat.
I think I'd say don't be afraid to go a little bit further than like where all the touristy places are. So then you get to see really cool things that aren't as crowded. Yeah, I think try the food is a good thing to do.
Yeah, the people there are really friendly. We didn't have any issues at all with locals. It seemed they're all very accommodating and nice. So I'd say just kind of dive in and, meet people and go to the, off the beaten path a little bit and just kind of try to immerse yourself in the whole culture there, because it really is a completely different way of life than, any other place I've been.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And so I'm curious, where's next for you guys? What's the next, big trip you're planning?
So big trip, we haven't started planning any big trips yet, but this weekend we're actually headed to Havasu Falls in just part of the Grand Canyon there in northern Arizona.
Havasupai.
Oh, Havasupai. So which is really exciting for us. We were up early at the start of February to get permits to go do that. Other than that, I think we both are really set on heading to Africa next, but we haven't started planning it just yet. But that's our next big one.
It's still in the design phase, as it were.
The idea phase.
Yeah, exactly.
R&D.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But there'll be other little things here and there. I mean, we're pretty much gone every weekend. We're doing, whatever local hikes and stuff we can. Around my area here in Arizona, there's just a whole lot to see. A lot of great places.
Amazing. And so if people want to find out more about you guys' Icelandic adventures or other adventures you guys are on, where can they go to find you?
I've posted a little bit on my Instagram, which is just yvette.travels. And I'm in the works of kind of putting together a little bit of a website with just posts about pretty much just on Iceland at the moment.
Kind of tips and tricks and
just our 10-day itinerary, just because I felt that's what I needed when I was planning my trip but couldn't find it. And it's just it'll be onepeakatatime.com. So I'm just working on that, and that should be up and running by the time this podcast goes live.
Yeah, and I'm excited to see more about that, and we'll make sure we put links for that in the show notes. And if anyone's listening in their car and you're like, oh, like I don't know how to plan my trip because I don't know how to spell these places, we'll have everything written out for you. Yvette will have it all written at her on her website and that sort of thing. So yeah, there'll be lots of resources to help plan a trip.
For sure.
Amazing. Thank you guys so much for your time today.
Yeah, thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having us. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, we really like talking about it. It's been 2 months since we got back, so it was nice to reminisce a little bit.
To find more information, relevant links, and photos talked about in this week's episode, check out theworldwanderers.com.
If you have a question, comment, or feedback, send us an email at info@theworldwanderers.com. Join our community on Facebook at The World Wanderers or on Twitter at WorldWanderers1. As always, thanks so much for listening.
Have a great day.
Bye.